Welcome to the press room, a very special edition of it. I am M. David Lee III. I am the news director here at AZPM, and we are at the beautiful Paul and Alice Baker Center for Public Media. Tonight is a special show because we're talking all about the RTA Next plan. It is an important plan that affects Pima County and one that we all as a community need to talk about. Tonight we have a great group of folks joining us to have this conversation.
Yeah.
First, the Executive Director of the Regional Transportation Authority, Mike Ortega.
Just pause it if you want to speak.
We have Ted Maxwell, the Chair of the Arizona State Transportation Board and an RTA board member as well.
And I'll raise my hand if I want you to pause it.
Arizona Daily Star, Caitlin Schmidt from Tucson Spotlight, and Nick Rommel from AZPM News. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Tonight we're here to have a discussion, a conversation, if you will, regarding the RTA Next project.
Well, I know Tim Steller, who's on the right side of the screen for me, and possibly the other reporters, but certainly Tim Steller is kind of a skeptic of RTA. I don't know if there's like a real con view presented here, because the two gentlemen on my left from the RTA and the Transportation Board are definitely going to be pro, I'm guessing.
Can you move your mouse to highlight who is who?
Let's see. For some reason, there we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
This guy's Tim Steller. These are the two other journalists. This guy's from the Transportation Board, State Transportation Board, and this is the guy from RTA on the current RTA administration.
Nice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What Pima County voters are really going to have to think about when they have to come to the voter booth in March. There is a lot at stake with this vote and a lot to discuss. First, though, we want to remind you of what the RTA Next is all about, and we have a look back at the first 20 years and how they've gone so far.
Tonight on the Friday Night Roundtable, a green light for the $2 billion regional transportation plan. Mark, the RTA, the Regional Transportation Authority, they've been countless meetings they've been holding for the past couple of months on this plan. They finally agreed. Is there enough in this plan that voters will go for it?
I just don't know. When this whole process started, you thought this is the one that's going to work.
This is a blast
After
from the past.
4 attempts to convince Pima County residents to raise a half-cent sales tax to pay for...
This is a bit of a blast from the past. Buckmaster had just recently ended his show, or announced the end of his show, and some of those reporters have a lot less hair now.
transportation improvements. In 2006, the RTA plan passed by a 3-2 margin. The proposal has so far invested $1.6 billion to road improvements, bike and walkways, and alternative transportation. Major projects were completed along Houghton, Tangerine, Valencia, and along Silver Bell, among others. Midtown streets like Grant and Broadway underwent extensive road widenings. RTA partially funded the streetcar and the controversial Downtown Links project that is still under construction. But what does the average citizen think of the RTA 20 years later?
I know it's the Regional Transportation something.
Is it the Road Traffic Association or something like that?
I have no idea what that is. The road project for the underpass, I think about the aftermath and the 4 or 5 years it took to get to where we are now and kicking artists out and the impact it's had on our neighborhood.
When I think about RTA, it's just been this obstacle. I used to walk through this neighborhood back and forth to downtown all the time.
One thing most people can all agree on is that driving, biking, and even walking in Tucson can be frustrating and our roads need work. But deciding how to do that for a county of over 1 million people, all with their own needs and preferences, is a challenge.
We have to make a project here appeal to a larger group, which is really, the heart and soul of the RTA is that it is voter approved. So this is really driven by what the community here needs and what they want.
They need a lot of work. There's a lot of potholes.
How the roads are, they're not that good because I've lived here all my life. I've replaced my windshield many times and I'll continue to do so.
I think the city does have issues with our transportation network.
It's not good for the people that run or ride their bikes or our cars.
I think we have transportation needs in this town. And I've seen the traffic grow just over the past couple of years at this intersection. But would it have been that much worse if we wouldn't have had the $2 billion? I don't know, so I can't answer that.
I hear regularly, why doesn't Tucson solve its transportation problems like Phoenix has? And to me, the direction that Phoenix went was great for that time, which was expansion and development. And I kind of like Tucson being a little bit less convenient for automobile traffic. I'm more of an alternative transportation guy myself.
I love to drive, just like everybody else. But being able to just go out of the door and get onto a ride and go somewhere is just great. It's just wonderful. I love public transportation.
So when the plan was developed, we did an outreach effort where we went out to different communities, to different organizations, came to communities like South Tucson. Overwhelmingly, we heard that roadway reconstruction was a big issue.
In the past, the overwhelming majority of the funds has been used to widen roads. Widening a road to solve traffic problems is like buying a fatter belt to address weight loss.
We could just optimize the roads we have. We could pass funding infrastructure that just improves the existing roadways, repaves it, and keeps it in good condition. We don't need large capital improvement projects that super expand our sprawl into the desert.
There really isn't an alternative in terms of using local funds. We would have to look, for the state or the federal government to help out, which isn't always a good option. Those funds often have strings attached to them, and they're also very limited.
On March 10th, 2026, 20 years after the first RTA election, Pima County residents will have an opportunity to vote on RTA Next, which will continue the existing half-cent sales tax and the Regional Transportation Authority for another 20 years.
Let's pause there for a sec.
Absolutely.
Could they have grabbed a panel of people who were like more totally ignorant about the RTA?
I mean, that's kind of the norm for local government, isn't it?
True enough. But one of the ladies, the one that was speaking there at the end, she's wearing an RTA pin and it doesn't disclose that she's, actually with the RTA.
Yeah.
Doesn't identify her at all.
I couldn't really see her name, so if you could scroll down a bit, that would probably help. Some of the names are getting cut off. But I'm kind of in the same boat as a lot of those people with my initial reactions to this, is that we don't really need major expansion of our roadways in any sort. We just need to keep them in good condition.
Yeah.
If anything, if we're going to take on a big project, it would be for public transportation, because that's what would make things more affordable in Tucson. But it's like the lady said, there's limited funds from the state and from the federal government.
Yeah, my quarrel with RTA from the beginning, and I was skeptical, and a lot of my skepticism kind of panned out, was that that it seemed to really focus on local roadway improvement, capacity increase, widening, intersection improvement, things like that are really more local than regional. I mean, I thought that the idea of having a regional transportation authority would be to coordinate and spend money on regional links between communities here in Pima County, not improving road capacity in the various localities. And it seems to spend the majority of its time and attention and money, most importantly, on those local projects. And it seems almost like a log rolling situation. There's 9 votes on this panel. Tucson's got one of them. And each one of those, other communities that are in the RTA also have an equal 1 vote. Each. And so, Tucson's putting a lot of money into this. It's the vast majority of the population involved. And we've got 1/9 of the voting power. And that seems to me problematic and tends to cause this situation where everybody gets their little fingers in the pie for their local projects, their local preferences, and nobody really pays attention to the bigger picture, which is trying to knit this metro area into a cohesive whole from a transportation standpoint, especially as regards public transportation options. The being able to take public transportation from here to Marana, for instance, is anybody got their eye on that? If we want to go to the far east side and want to go one of the subdivisions out there, or the far west side, is anybody looking at the public transportation options that are available and improving them at all? And so that's kind of my whole thing is that regional transportation seems to be a bit of a misnomer to me, because it doesn't really focus on regional transportation. It focuses on the localities in the region. And
I think
RTA Next priorities seem to be about the same as the last one.
these are interconnected issues. The lack of funding for anything big means that there's probably no direction for this body except for localities. And so each local representative, which, yes, I would agree that Tucson not having more votes on its surface just seems undemocratic, but the fact that it has all these different representatives from different local areas, without any direction, without any funding for big projects, they're of course just going to use the funding for their own thing and be like, okay, I'll get this, I'll get that, you'll get that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's just, it really seems like RTA lacks that direction. But it also comes with the fact that it's money, and it stinks so much that it just comes down to the fact that we have an awful state government and a federal government. Right now, I can't even say this is just a GOP issue. Even if Democrats were in charge, I don't know if we would get the funding for any sort of massive public transportation project.
Yeah. I don't know if it's fair to blame RTA on state or national leaders, but certainly there's a dearth of funding for big transportation projects, especially public transportation projects, because MAGA is like convinced that we're trying to take away their ICE cars and internal combustion engine cars. Not
I was confused. I was really confused when I heard that at first. I was like, wait. Yeah. What do you mean by ICE?
Combustion engines, yeah. So, get them out of their cars and, force everybody to lock down within 15 minutes of their homes and, impose global government or some bizarre paranoid shit that, these guys come up with, out of nowhere. So it is an issue, and it is something to blame the state and national leaders for. But this is all us. RTA is all us. We're fucking it up all on our own perfectly well.
Yes, they definitely should have at least a plan, even if they don't have funding for it. There should be a plan for a larger regional transportation network. There should be discussions on public transportations, discussions on how to use automobiles in the 21st century. I mean, there's just so many different things that can affect our transportation, and there just isn't that cohesive plan that they're even considering. Yeah. But let's continue.
There is a tranche of money for bus service, which is nice. I'm not sure how big it is, but it is a nice portion of the money. But as far as I've heard, there is no money to expand light rail, which is the one good thing I think we got out of the RTA last time around. Was that, and without expansion of that, I don't see really the point of RTA Next. But let's continue to listen and see if I could be wrong about that. Because I'm often wrong about things, I'll admit.
Major improvements are planned for Irvington, Drexel, Prince, Orange Grove, 29th Street, and the new Sonoran corridor.
Full disclosure: I live on Prince.
Sometimes projects take for freaking ever. If it started and there's no one there for weeks or months, and the project has been initiated and not finished, that doesn't make sense.
This new iteration of RTA, they're saying, yes, we know it went poorly, but we promise it's different this time. And I just find it hard to imagine that things will be that different from the 20 years experience we've had.
We need to support our community, Tucson, so we can have better roads for everybody.
I would be upset, I suppose is a word that I would use, about more of the same.
conditions remain the same, we could expect 48,000 jobs.
Between now and when the ballots go out in February, we're here to provide information to anybody, any organization, any community group that would like more information. That's what we're here for, and we're happy to provide that.
Despite how I feel about it, I know that we do need better roads in Tucson, and we need to put more thought into that and invest. Yeah, for sure. If we want to continue driving cars, which we don't have to, we could all just do golf carts and bikes. I think it'd be cool.
Okay, Mike, golf carts and bikes. I know that's an alternative for some folks, but just in general, take us through a little bit about the RTA Next plan. What are some things that people really need to understand?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think the important thing to understand is it's a 20-year plan. The legislature gave us authority 20 years ago, actually about 22 years ago, to go to the voters. And that's a key piece of this because the ultimate form of accountability, the best form of accountability is the voter going to them and asking them. So the conversation really is one of what does the need or what are the needs of the community as a whole? So through a series of
Yeah, I would point out that maybe going to the voters once every generation is maybe not often enough. I think RTA being a 20-year plan with the time and planning horizon being so long is kind of one of its weaknesses. I think if they were to do it in chunks of 5 years, it would make a hell of a lot more sense to like steer and course correct. I mean, when you have only full 20 years between accountability to the public, I think a lot of things can go awry. What do you think?
I think overall, honestly, I could go either way on that because 20 years, I'm not familiar with construction, but I imagine things can go long, and having to go back every 5 years can result in those situations where potentially they started a project, but then never get to finish it because it didn't get renewed type thing. So that 20-year buffer does help, but I can also see it being, what's that economic term? Moral hazard within the people involved to end up incidentally utilizing all 20 years, even if they didn't need to use all 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think there's some pros and cons, but yeah, 20 years is a long time. So I'd probably lean with you, but maybe not as low as 5.
And even given 20 years, I mean, there was a mess of projects that they were originally proposed for RTA that never got finished, even though they had 20 years.
Of public engagement, both through a citizens advisory committee with public outreach afterward, including the jurisdictional partners. That plan is then developed and it has something for everyone. There's opportunity not only for roads, as you heard there, in terms of some of the constraints there, but also public transit and also other alternative modes of transportation. So the key here is we have to go back to the voters, ask for permission, ask for an approval of a new plan, but also the funding that goes along with that. And so those two questions will be on the ballot in March.
Okay, Caitlin, what are you hearing from folks in your reporting about how they're feeling right now about where we're at with the project in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm hearing a lot of the same. You know, it depends on who you talk to. There are a lot of good points that came out of the first RTA project, but there is a lot of uncertainty as well. You know, like these people in the video said, more of the same is not necessarily something we want, but they do want better roads and they do want more access to public transportation and they do want safer roads for their bicycles. So it's, you know, they want these things, but do they want it this way? We'll find out in March.
Ted, what do you think it will mean if this passes kind of not only for Tucson, but for the state of Arizona?
Well, for the state of Arizona, this is about investing in ourselves. Let's be honest. The state is not going to bring dollars to our region to fix our roads. The federal government's not going to bring dollars to fix our region to our roads. We have to figure out how we can leverage the dollars they do give us. And RTA Next is one way to do it. Everything that was mentioned in that video presentation is available in RTA Next. People like to focus on the 31 new projects, the 7 carryover projects, but every single one of those projects has bicycle, pedestrian, drainage improvements. It not only fixes the roads, creates new roads. There's not as many new miles in this one, but it addresses all of those issues. It makes the roads better and safer for everybody in this community. And if you really take a dive, and too often you just look at the headlines and the total number, look at the individual projects. They all have safety embedded in them, and they all have improvements on each road as well.
Okay, Tim, when you look at the plan, the way it's laid out right now versus the way it first started, I guess, 20 years ago, what are some of the things you're seeing?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that jumps out is that there are 7 projects from the last iteration of the RTA 1 that are to be completed. And I guess that's to me the biggest question in this is if we put our faith or our vote toward a 20-year plan 20 years ago and it wasn't completed, why would we do that again? And I guess I would, if you're willing, I'd ask you all that.
Yeah, I'll take that one just because it's absolutely true. And what people forget is when that plan went in front of the voters, at 2.1, they used the method of economic projections that would be dead middle, which means it's a 50-50 flip of the coin. This one, the board did a good job of talking it through, and they're using the pessimistic view, which means 80% of the time you're going to get more income than you had. We had 2008. Now, you can always say that there's going to be some glitch in the economy. That was a big setback. And you also had the COVID pandemic, 2 what I would call abnormal incidents. But the big thing was we did not collect the money that the original forecast had because of those incidents. And
that's a really good point. I think what Tim is underlining there is the fact that this is an addition to the sales tax. And sales tax not only being highly regressive, meaning that poor people pay a larger portion of their incomes toward it than rich people do, but it's also highly cyclical. So if we have economic downturns like they just mentioned, 2008, we're going to have a lot less revenue than would be projected from that sales tax because sales slow down, people stop buying things, they economize. And that's a very good point. I mean, then maybe sales tax isn't the best way to raise revenues for transportation projects, in the first place. Maybe we're, barking up the wrong tree by doing it this way in the first place.
Yeah, I found it a bit funny when he said it, 2008 and COVID was abnormal. No, from my point of view, that's quite normal. We have periods of okay economies and then absolute dog water economies. But no, you're absolutely right. It's regressive. It's completely cyclical. It isn't a great way to fund, but unfortunately, I am not an expert in taxation, and it's something I do want to learn more about. But I know, like, if we were to switch to a property tax, that would kind of balance things out where the wealthier would pay more. But there's always that fear that wealthier people will then move to a different location, which I guess could incidentally mean housing prices drop, but probably not by a lot.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a lot to a homeowner to add a couple of bucks to their annual tax bill. But it is ultimately a creature of the existing legislature at the time, and now that they have given the locality an authority only to increase sales tax by X amount and not to increase any other tax or to finance it any other way. And that's a reflection of, like you said, state leadership's priorities has always been, at least in even my memory, which is a lot longer than yours perhaps, to denigrate and undermine any other source of income than the sales tax, because it is the most regressive. And that's why they like it so much, is because the poors get to pay.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the Pima County Board of Supervisors couldn't do a property tax because the state forbids them?
No, I don't think that's exactly it. I think that the Board of Supervisors could do some sort of change to the property rates in order to address transportation needs. They are under certain constraints by the state. I'm not sure if that's one of them. I think that would be a great question for the Board of Supervisors. But they are creatures of the state government. They're wholly, directed by the state government. And so it's a possibility that that wouldn't be available. But what I'm saying is that the RTA, the special taxing district that the state government has outlined that is eligible to do this tax increment, is only available for a sales tax. You can't use any other kind of source of revenue. for this special increment district other than the sales tax. So if we want to do an RTA at all, it's got to be a sales tax, is what I'm saying. We could do a regional plan between the local governments that doesn't have anything to do with the state government or an increment financing district, perhaps, that would be based on some other source of revenue. But I'm not sure about the legalities and the ins and outs and the state laws and restrictions and everything. I think we'd have to speak to a panel of county attorneys in order to figure that out.
Yeah. I think that's good information, though, that the RTA is not just a body with a duty. It's a district that has limitations set on it by the state. So that's good information. Thank you. Let's continue.
All right.
That's why those 7 projects are there. They all need money, and some of them need some structural changes that we need to go back to the voter to get, because this is a voter-approved plan with voter-approved ideas. So there's a lot of things in this plan, including a new element I'm sure we'll talk about later, that weren't in the first one, to ensure that we don't face what we were facing the last 5 years.
You mind if I add this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, Tim, I think it's a very valid concern, a very valid question. So let's dissect what went on 20 years ago versus what's going on today. Now, clearly, projecting out 20 years is really difficult. It doesn't matter who you are, projecting that out is very tough. I think the conversation today, though, is really the accountability. That accountability has been something I've been working with the board to establish, and there's a few components of that. The first is quarterly reports to the board with the Citizens Oversight Committee, which is basically the Citizens Accountability for Regional Transportation, the CART committee. And that's important because they're going to be looking hard at not only schedules, but also the finances. And it's not just a look back, but what we've actually done is establish criteria by which they're going to be looking at the entirety of the program. And it's important that that conversation happen in public so that when or if there's a problem, there's a challenge in the 12th year, we're not waiting until the 11th year to understand or recognize it, but instead we're doing that up front. That same analysis, that same quarterly reporting also goes through the Technical Management Committee, which didn't necessarily happen in the past. That's important, and that's a key differentiation between the way that the original RTA was administered and the way we're projecting it going forward. Last thing I'll leave you with is those are now codified. Those are the administrative code that has been established by the RTA board for how this RTA Next will be implemented going forward.
Nick, as you have conversations with folks, what are they saying to you? What is standing out for them when they look now at this proposal?
Well, I think it's similar to what we saw in the video. A lot of people know it's something to do with transportation, but I think, again, like Tim said, the kind of poster child that a lot of people know is Grand Road, of course. Grand Road is still under. So really, I think that is the fundamental question that most people have is the one that Tim just posed. And that the new plan, I'm sure people have willingness to trust the RTA that it will change something, but are also skeptical.
Okay. One of the questions that came to us via Slido, can federal money cover the cost of these projects if the RTA Next doesn't pass?
So today, for example, I was up at the state legislature talking to some of the bipartisan leaders in both the House and the Senate, and we received a briefing from ADOT. And the federal dollar situation coming to this state is going the wrong direction right now. Now, there's some things that can be addressed, and the federal government's been good about stepping in and doing one-time funding to get the highway funds back up. But the fact of the matter is, there is not a federal solution. And so there are no federal dollars that can cover any of the shortfalls. The investment that was made 20 years ago was made as a plan. And if you look at this plan and you overlay the two maps.
That was bureaucratese for hell no.
maps from RTA 1 and RTA Next. It fills in a lot of the gaps that were not covered in that first part of the plan. Maricopa has done it. They've done it differently than us, and we're not going to do it like they do. But the fact of the matter is they're on year 42 of their regional transportation investment. And what happens if this doesn't go through is we get in line with all the other 13 counties to compete for our projects and that funding that may be able to come from the state dollars as well. This is a way of codifying it, voter approved, and guarantees us entrance into the 5-year state transportation plan.
Caitlin, do you sense from the people that you're talking with, I don't know if it's that they believe that the next 20 years can happen and be a continuation of what's going on, or do they just say, we got 20 years in, let's move on to something else?
We write for a younger audience. We interview a lot of young voters. So we deal with a lot of people that didn't vote in the first RTA election and really are just starting to pay attention to it now and get involved. And one of the questions that I get a lot from them is about the power dynamic and the vote split. Tucson represents such a large part of the region. It brings in so much of the sales tax, but the city still gets one vote. The project split, so that they're confused about the structure. I'm hearing a lot. So,
Mike, you want to address that?
I do. Since I was part of that argument a few years ago, I don't mind telling you about that. So people have asked what's changed, and the dynamic has truly changed in the chemistry of the RTA and PAG, quite frankly. So the first thing is I mentioned the Citizens Accountability for Regional Transportation, the CART Committee, very influential group now, and is basically reconstituted to include 4 residents from the city of Tucson. So in essence, 4 votes, 1 as a transit advocate as well. So that opportunity for additional voices at that level is extremely important. But let's also take a step back to the.
All right, I got to call a little bit of bullshit. The CART doesn't really have the power to reallocate money. It's an oversight body. So the idea that, somehow that's going to improve Tucson's ability to increase our stake, increase the amount of money that comes to us and our regional needs as opposed to the others is kind of a red herring argument. I think that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, if Tucson if the CART doesn't have ability to veto or anything, then it's just a complaint body. So it's just, you get 3 more voices to complain, basically.
Yeah, it's where complaints go to die. Yeah. I'm going to grab something to drink so you can edit this portion out here. I'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm back. The mush between my ears that my brain has become. Just as a viewer note, if you hear a lot of hacking during this thing, I apologize. I'm recovering from the flu. So I'm also a little bit stupid.
No worries. And I'm imagining we'll be splitting this up into 2 VODs. Like I said, I have something else at 6:30.
Okay. Yeah. Looks like we have an hour and 26 minutes left here. So yeah, I don't think we can get that done. So here we go again.
The Technical Management Committee as well. The Technical Management Committee was reconstituted. There's 3 votes, if you will, 3 members for the city of Tucson now. There's 2 for Pima County and 1 for the other jurisdictional partners. Now keep in mind that, as I mentioned, on a quarterly basis, those groups will come before the board in a public setting and make recommendations and have conversations around whatever is on their mind with regard to successful implementation of the plan going forward, which again is the accountability.
Tim, $2.67 billion. That's a lot of money. And, there are still some shortfalls from, the first 20 years. What are folks saying that you're seeing?
Well, I think one of the big questions I've heard about is relates to the money to be spent on the overhanging projects, that is the projects from the last iteration and the money on hand. So if you could spell this out for me, I'd love to hear it. My understanding is it's about $258 million worth of projects that are left to be done. Is that right? Okay. But you all have money on hand too in the hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Do you know about how much that is?
I do, and I can answer that.
Yeah, go.
I can answer it now. Or you want me to?
Yeah,
do it
sure. No,
after
sure.
you finish.
Yeah, maybe we can have a dialogue. Yeah.
So we have $423 million that are, we'll call fund balance, that's been committed to completing the RTA 1 projects that are not on the ballot. And that's important because you'll hear commentary about, well, you have a fund balance, you got all this money to make. Yes, but we have 22nd Street Bridge that just kicked off. We have the completion of Grant Road, for example. Those dollars are already committed to those RTA 1 projects.
So if we don't pass RTA Next, that money will be there, but will be totally committed to projects that are already on the books. Is that what you're saying?
So absolutely. So the money that is in the bank today for RTA 1 is committed to RTA 1 projects and the completion of those projects. The additional money, the $257 million that you mentioned, is also part of leveraging other regional monies that will be brought forth and used to complete those RTA 1 projects. So it's important that all of those projects be completed, and the board is absolutely committed to making that happen.
Another alternative, I know it's not something that is really in the air right now, and it's not on the ballot or anything, but you all are speaking as if there is no alternative. There's no federal money, and I agree with that. There's no state money. And if RTA is passed, then, what are we going to do? Well, isn't the obvious answer that the jurisdictions will pass or put to the voters their own half-cent sales tax? So Marana, Sahuarita, Oro Valley, and Tucson will all do some version of a sales tax to do some of the similar things to what we would be doing.
And Tim, you're right on that. That is the alternative. The alternative is to let the municipalities, those who want to go forward with the tax in their communities, to go on their own. But what we miss is transportation is a regional issue. Cars and roads, they don't know what jurisdiction they're in. I live in Oro Valley, when I drive in every day, we were talking about it. RTA 1, we forget all the projects they did, like La Cañada and Lochoya. When I used to drive down those roads, I'd be driving down and I go, okay, I'm in Oro Valley. Oh, okay, now I'm in the county.
Because you can feel it.
Now I'm
in the car, yeah.
The cars don't know, the roads don't know. And if we want to have a good collaborative transportation system that works for all, and that's for all. That's not just for the cars. That's for the transit users that use it. That's for pedestrian and bike users that want to use it. If we don't have them be collaborative, then we're just getting into little portions of the county that are in one shape, and you just go 10 miles north and it's totally different.
If I may follow up just with one more thing. When I look at the map and I see how the projects have been kind of doled out, a few to Sahuarita, a few in Oro Valley, et cetera, it looks to me like even though this is a regional plan, it's almost been done jurisdictionally so that everybody gets their fair share.
Yeah.
So, well, it's regional, and I don't see the connections myself, and maybe I'm wrong. So if you want to explain that to me, please feel free.
Let me maybe take a stab at that. So yes, those investments are scattered across the entirety of the region. Colossal Cave to the east, Sahuarita Interchange to the south, Moore Road Interchange to the north. So let's take a look at those interchanges just as an example. So if you look at Tangerine Road and Rita Road, two examples. Today, cars will actually back up onto the main freeway line, dead stop, because there's congestion, they can't get off the freeway. The concern obviously then is if you draw the map, right, that project on Tangerine is in Marana, so that should be a Marana project. The Rita Road interchange should be in the city of Tucson because that's in Tucson. But I can assure you that when you're stopped on the road, it doesn't matter what jurisdiction you're in because that safety problem, that constraint is going to be there regardless of from where you came. So think about it that way. But then also think about if you don't use I-10. Most people do. But let's say you don't use I-10 regularly or you don't ever use I-10. Virtually every aspect of your life comes in on I-10, whether it's the grocery store whether it's the delivery of other goods and services in a semi pickup truck or a semi tractor trailer. And those interchanges become important. And those are just examples of the regional value of that improvement and that investment. Again, as Ted mentioned, it's investing in ourselves in a regional manner. We initially didn't start off with saying, where are the jurisdictions? We looked at these projects regionally, but then people started to ask, well, what's in it for me? You know, where are these boundaries? So we draw them and outline that. But when you start to take a little bit of a step back, and then you look at the Tohono O'odham Nation, just as an example, we have one of the highest bus routes on the nation going to Sells and over to Ajo. We have a waiting list today for folks. Now, I can tell you when you do a straight population analysis, right? You know, they wouldn't necessarily qualify for that investment. But we all know and understand the importance of that investment to get folks to their employment, to get folks to see their families. And again, we have a waiting list. So those are just some examples of how that regional approach is all inclusive.
Caitlin, one of the things that I've heard a lot since coming to town is that the streetcar was a big thing that was a part of, the RTA Part 1. What do you think is going to happen, again, if this passes or if it doesn't pass, to that?
I mean, sure, fare free transit has been a huge point of discussion since it became free in the pandemic. I think the streetcar is a huge asset to the community. It's certainly very popular amongst the university students and that crowd, but I think the streetcar will survive with or without the RTA. What might be a question is what happens to the fares on the streetcar, the fares on the bus if we don't have funding from here.
And Nick, anything that you've been seeing?
Yeah, the fare-free question comes up at City Council constantly, and generally the consensus is that if RTA Next doesn't pass, the city doesn't have a ton of options for keeping it that way because they might have to start raising revenues for the transit system in new ways. And the other thing I would just point out is that the city has a whole slew of transit safety upgrades that they want to do, which are also contingent on RTA Next funding.
Okay. In order for this plan to pass, there needs to be, I guess, a yes vote on two parts of it. For 18 and for 19, one to pass the plan and then one to pass the funding source. I guess, Ted or Mike, I'll open this one up to you. If both pass, what's the overall vision for the project kind of moving forward, maybe that we're not talking about?
Well, the importance of them both passing is if either one fails, they both fail. So it's not like, you obviously can't have a plan that has no funding, and you can't collect funding for no plan. They've got to both be there. So that is a real important thing for folks to remember. The challenge, and you've heard some of the concerns over there. I personally don't know if free fares are tied into the RTA. I tell you they're not. They're tied to the votes of the city council. And that's what it really comes down to. And there free fares has some support there. So I personally have said, I think if it passes, you're going to have free fares. And if it fails, you're going to have. Because the 10 to 8 to 12 million is a relatively small number in the overall spectrum. The streetcar, there's $40,000 of continued, or $40 million over the 20 years. So $2 million a year to operate that in the plan. The challenge will be is come June 1st or July 1st, when the first plan ends, money goes. That's the money for the continuation of building some of the roads we've got. We've got the money that Mike Ortega talked about that's going to let us finish those other ones. But those other 7, we're going to have to figure out where that money's coming from. And it's going to take a significant more amount of time. So that's going to slow down. But the things that are going to be heard on the transit side are significant. Mike referenced the shuttle out to Ajo and some of the more regions that are farther away from the city of Tucson. People forget Pima County's over 9,100 square miles. City of Tucson's 426 square miles. Those are big. We are big communities in big areas, but there will be impact on dial ride. There'll be impact on paratransit. There'll be impact on routes. There's a lot of things that are going to fall away if it doesn't happen. Everybody wants to say, what's the plan going forward? And the plan going forward is what Tim outlined. Individual municipalities can go it on their own, and then they're going to set their priorities. They're going to have the responsibility in the bank, the planner, and the builder, where the RTA accountability ensures that RTA is the bank, The plan's voter protected. And then we work with the municipalities and all the jurisdictions to complete the project. So you've got a broader coverage on that. But the fact of the matter is there's going to be a lot of unknown if this doesn't pass. And I think it's a risk that could cause some issues on, for sure, our transportation systems connectivity. But even inside the individual municipalities, I think it's going to be difficult.
Tim, when you think
Can you
about
pause
this,
it?
the half-cent sales tax has already been here for.
What I'm not really hearing specifically is how exactly these plans are going to help people. It's very conceptual. Like if they want to make an argument that will save businesses money, that groceries may in theory get cheaper, I'm not sure I'd buy that argument, but if they wanted to make it, it would at least have some merit, economically speaking. But overall, they aren't really getting into any of the specifics of their plans with RTA, where the projects are going to happen and how it's going to make people's lives better, even through the annoyance of having to deal with construction.
Yeah, that's all true. We have about a little less than an hour left, so maybe they'll eventually get to some of those points. But they certainly haven't made that case thus far, except I don't know, vaguely saying that, you know, delays on I-10 could have economic consequences, which I guess is true.
Yeah, when he was mentioning about people backing up onto main roads from the freeway, I mean, what I was thinking was if that's in Marana, the people doing that are most likely Marana people, as it's most likely rush hour traffic, high traffic times when such congestion happens. So even though, yeah, those people could be moving into going to work, I should say, in Tucson. And so there is a bit of regional concept for traffic, of course. It's still going to be the people in Marana who's benefiting from any repairs there. So the alternative that's being discussed right now, it doesn't honestly sound that bad because it would be pretty similar from what I'm gathering. It would still be each individual group just finding their own revenue source and then making the projects that their local community needs.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Do we really need the money to be regional if we can just make the decision making regional? You know, I mean, everybody pays their own freight, but you know, we kind of have a PEG situation, a PEMA Association of Governments situation where, you know, the transportation authorities from all those regional governments get together and talk about what their priorities should be and, you know, decide locally whether or not to spend the money on it. Seems like a perfectly valid way to do it, maybe a little less efficient. But it certainly seems, I don't know, maybe more flexible than what they're proposing here with another RTA.
I mean, if they're not going to make, like how we've discussed previously, a big overarching regional plan, then I don't really see much purpose in the body if it's just going to be local stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be a funding constraint that, you know, this is how much money we have and we can raise. So this is the stuff that we can do. But it is a very valid point to say it doesn't have much ambition in terms of actually like being a game changer for regional transportation. You know, and if you really wanted to change the game, I mean, the thing to do would be to get, you know, the Phoenix Metro and the Tucson Metro together and fund a freaking light rail between the two cities, for fuck's sake.
I would take just a train at this point, just a normal train.
Yeah.
We have a train station in Tucson, people. If you don't know, Tucson has a train station. You can take it up to Maricopa City, but that's as far as they'll get.
Yeah. It's madness. You know, the fact that that could have just a transformative effect on our economies, and it's like just nowhere on the radar, I think, is a failure of state leadership. And you know, who can you lay that down to? You know, the MAGAs who are squatting in our legislature right now. I'm sure that if Democrats were in charge, that would be one of the first things we talk about is you know, turning Tucson and Phoenix into a place where you can commute between without having to have a car and wait 2 hours, you know, waste 2 hours on the road.
Well, then maybe Hobbs and other Dems should be campaigning on that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I've never been startled by our ability to, you know, to message badly.
All right.
So,
Let's get a little bit more in.
all right. Yeah. Just today, freaking Hobbs came out and said that AG Mays should retract her statement about ICE. I don't know if you heard that, but AG Mays said, it could be an issue here in Arizona because we have a very strong stand your ground laws in Arizona. And so these ICE agents going around arms and pointing their guns at people and shit might be a really bad idea here in Arizona. That shit could happen. And she's right. Shit could happen. Shit probably will happen. And people will probably die if they try that shit in Arizona that they've tried in Minnesota. And so it's just like a factual statement. And Hobbs has so little spine that she's telling AG Mays to retract her statement because it didn't land well. Because MAGA has twisted it out of all proportion to make it like into some kind of threat or something by our attorney general, which it is the furthest thing from. So yeah, I mean, our ability to shoot ourselves in the head is just like limitless, apparently.
Yeah, but that's a bit sad, but also let's focus on RTA.
Yeah, the thing at hand. Yeah, okay. I just had to get that rant out.
No, I can't blame you for that. I'm also steaming just hearing that.
Yeah, back to the show. All right. Okay, come on. Hello.
20 years. Another 20 years. I mean, it continues, right? Is it as opposed to having to start a new poll tax again?
Well, right. That's why we're here now, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but you all were hoping to get this election done earlier. But now it's the last minute. I remember you and I, Ted, have talked and you have insisted various times, not just with me, that you want to put a plan before the voters. My memory is that before time runs out. So that is the situation, right? That it has to be done before the time arises when it's called a tax increase. That's the political reality, right?
That's true, but I think the thing to take away from that discussion is, yes, in a perfect world, we would have given this to the voters about a year ago. If it fails, we figure out why it failed, and we have a chance to come back before we lose the funding. If the funding goes away, the roads don't instantly improve. Matter of fact, it's going to be the opposite. They're going to go in the other direction. The investment in all of our infrastructure, whether it's pedestrian, bicycle, transit, or support for vehicles, is going to go away. But at the time, we didn't have a solid plan. It was continued to be a discussion at the board, and eventually, plan we finally got to, and you heard it loud and clear from all of the mayors. This is a plan. Perfect? No, you're never going to get a perfect plan when it's regional and it's collaborative and it's compromised. But this is a good plan, and they all voted to move this forward and still have maintained their support.
Mike, we have a question coming in from Slido that I think you can handle here. What metrics are we using to hold ourselves accountable to the promises made, especially regarding safety, mobility, and quality of life? Are we setting measurable goals for addressing the pedestrian safety crisis?
I'm a numbers guy, so thank you for that question. Let me give you a couple things, and I want to go back to the accountability, the quarterly reports, and the staff gets tired of me hearing me say that. That's extremely important because it's a litmus test as well against the plan, but also what's going on in the real world. Are there adjustments that need to be made? And if so, we have a conversation with the voter. We could go back to the voter after 5 years and have a discussion about saying, wait a minute, this was the 20-year plan, but we want to go back to the voter and have a conversation. Extremely important because, again, accountability. But with regard to the metrics, very specific, I'll give you a couple of numbers which were really surprising to me, quite frankly. The University of Arizona did a study on HOCs, which are the on-demand pedestrian crossings. At those locations, the pedestrian crashes reduced by 50%. I mean, that's huge. And so we have dollars set aside specifically for that kind of an investment. So then the next question from Tim is going to be, well, where are they going to go, right? We want to know. Well, that's a function of data, but also community input. And that's a unique part of this plan where there is a mechanism by which the community can provide input on the location of those going forward. But I'm going to give you a couple other statistics as well, a couple other pieces. when you invest in bike safety, bike lanes, bike paths, you reduce the bike crashes, the vehicle conflicts, if you will, with bikes by about 40%. So when you look, and that's from the FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration. So when you look at those opportunities, we do have those metrics that we can test against. And so as we're going down this path, because pedestrian safety and bike safety, as well as vehicle safety, are all important. And the entirety of the $2.67 billion is an investment in safety. Every aspect of the plan is for safety.
Nick, how important have you seen from talking with folks is the bike infrastructure and try to expand that a little bit?
Well, it's pretty important for those among us, including myself, who use a bike to get around. I can say Tucson has a little ways to go compared to some other cities when it comes to being able to bike, and that has to do with bike lanes, bike paths, other than of course the great loop trail, but also just the way the roads are. Sometimes you just feel scared to even bike on the median of them. So, and I know that bike improvements are a bigger part of this RTA plan than the next one. So it would be interesting to see what kind of effect that would have on the overall landscape of biking in Tucson.
Okay, we have a question that was sent in to us from Logan Havens. Several RTA projects like Broadway, Boulevard, and First Avenue were approved decades ago with inaccurate projected capacity needs and roadway designs to no longer align with the current city of Tucson goals around safety, multimodal access, and land use. Can you explain how flexible the RTA is when voter-approved projects no longer reflect local priorities and what the real cost, financial and political, are to make those changes? Mike, you talked a little bit about going back to the voters if you need to.
Yes. Thank you, David. And Logan, thank you for that question. If you look at the plan, I believe it's note number 2, outlines flexibility that the board has for unforeseen conditions. Okay, so that's one opportunity. But keep in mind that the voter mandate, the voter commitment, is also covered by statute. And so there are certain pieces. So for example, 22nd Street is part of the RTA Next plan. Originally, that was supposed to be a 6-lane divided roadway. In the revised plan, based on data, based on community impact or input, it's a 4-lane divided. Well, that's an example. And those two, the Broadway and North First Avenue, are great examples. But the key piece to that is making sure that we're having that community dialogue. Because if we find that a roadway that is configured a certain way today needs to be revised down the road because of community input and or because of data, because of the traffic data, that we have the opportunity and the confidence, quite frankly, to go back out to the voter and have a conversation with the voter about that change. And those are the conversations that we're having now to make sure, going back to those quarterly reports, right? Make sure that those are the conversations that are happening now throughout the entirety of the program, not waiting until the 11th year for the 12th year project.
He keeps mentioning this about going back to the voter mid-plan. Are you familiar with what he's talking about there? I mean, to me, that's not, in my experience, is what could happen with this. I mean, how would they? Maybe I need to look into this more, but it seems to me unlikely that they're going to go back to the voter on anything in the next 20 years. Do you have more familiarity with that than I?
No, I am unfortunately not. It is interesting. If they do go back to the voters, I mean, obviously that would be more democratic, and so I would support it. But what I'm also hearing a lot about him in particular speak is the talk about data, and like, I'm not too familiar with the science behind all of this, but from what I understand, they can make some assumptions at times with,
they need to make
and what I'm just thinking about as he's talking about, traffic and all that, is how it's going to affect our small businesses. Because it's like, I don't want to see more road expansions on Broadway, Grant, or Speedway, and then there'll be no parking anywhere for the businesses that I want to attend. It's like, if anything, I want to be able to get across Broadway if I need to, but like ideally, I just want to be able to find the place I want to go to, and then if necessary, just be able to walk and cross the street easily to go to the different businesses that I may want to go to. Or if it's just one business, then just have enough parking there. There's one in particular that I like off of Broadway. It's a game store. And they just don't have a bunch of parking because there's like multiple different businesses there, right? There's plenty of land for different businesses, but it's just got this small strip and then a little bit on the back. And it's just like, no, we can't be doing that to our businesses. They need to have the space, the land for parking, or we need to be investing more in public transportation so people don't need cars.
Yeah, no, that brings up some excellent points about planning for regional transportation as it impacts local quality of life. I think we'll leave it for there for the night because I know you have to get to something. So we're at 37 minutes. So we'll pick up that next time. But I did want to address this point that you brought up, that the whole focus of making our transportational needs actuated through a regional transportation plan might, in fact, overemphasize some aspects of transportation, like throughput and quickness and ease of travel for the car, versus some of the more local needs of transportation. There seems to me to be a huge tension between that. If you look into some of the research and just media around like small towns. It's an organization that called Small Towns that looks at these kind of transportation issues, especially around road design and road development. One of the things that they note is that there's this big tension between getting the cars through and slowing them down and making it safer for people local. Who are the local businesses, the local residents who are using the streets for other purposes than just whipping through as fast as they possibly can. And what happens is this phenomenon that they've nicknamed stroads, which is like a combination between a street and a road. And there's a distinction that they make between them. One is for getting cars through as fast as possible, and the other one is for multi-use, for slowing down and allowing local businesses to have people walk around and to park conveniently and walk to the businesses and stuff like that, and have parks and safety and traffic calming so that people can use the streets as on a bike or on foot safely without feeling like they're standing next to a freeway or they have to play Frogger every time they want to cross the frickin' street. So that's a big tension, and maybe part of the problem that people have with RTA is that big tension between wanting to connect us regionally, wanting us to have a coordinated system of transportation that makes it convenient for people to travel from place to place. And that tension that, our streets suck, our streetscapes suck, our safety sucks, the quality of life on those streets when you're using those streets as a pedestrian, walking your dog, on a bike, on public transportation is at odds with the goals of regional transportation, especially when it focuses on cars. And so maybe that's a conversation that also needs to be had, that, part of our regional transportation planning might actually be improving people's experience, not just in getting from place to place, but in actually using places that are within our communities. And that seems to be like completely missed out. He's highlighted that there's some safety aspects, but safety doesn't necessarily always translate to livability and to usability and to just, human values, human scale values of, being in a place and liking it and enjoying using it.
I mean,
lost out.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance, but we all want safety, but if you want the safest thing, specifically in terms of like pedestrians or bikes, and also the fastest thing, you would just put interstates everywhere, right? Put walled interstates, those cars will get right through. They won't stop anywhere.
Yeah, we tried that. Didn't work out too well.
No, and nobody in Tucson wants to end up like a Phoenix with all the sorts of interstates and interchanges and all that stuff. So it is definitely a balance. And if they're not going to at least present some sort of cohesive view or plan of how this works regionally, then again, I do think that there's some merit to it being done locally. Even just the idea of local people may choose quality over quantity effectively. But it also, the last thing I do want to mention is some of the way he was speaking. I believe this guy's name is Mike. Is it kind of seemed like they didn't actually have specific plans yet. Like once we get this money, then we can start making plans type things is what I was kind of picking up.
There are projects that are outlined. Yeah. And maybe we should both go review that and review this thing that he's referring to about going back to the voter sometime within those 20 years before we continue with this viewing. So that's our assignments is we'll take a look at some of those specific projects that are proposed. I think they mentioned 21 of them plus 7 continuation plans. And whatever this mechanism is that we may be able to return to the voter sometime in the interim between now and 20 years from now. So I'll let you get to your appointment at 6:30 there. And so we'll sign off for now and be back with the second half.
Indeed.